We're ready to start the meeting. Everyone, please stand for the pledge. Yes, sir. Yeah, sure. Do you want to do it?
We could have 30 seconds of silence for the 12 soldiers that lost their lives and all the innocent lives, women, children, innocent people. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we do roll call, I'm going to read the Interpoint School District mission statement. Grounded by our history as one of the oldest publicly supported schools in Wisconsin, Interpoint School District is the heart of a small community that educates and inspires our students for a bright future in a big world. Angie, roll call, please.
Bush,
Here.
Dunn,
Here.
Eisner,
Here.
Janetka,
Here.
Galvin.
Here.
Becker,
Here.
Sullivan.
Here.
Okay, next we'll look at board communications received. Larry, you want us to go first, or?
Yeah, I can. I got more of a question. Any comments? On the 16th of August, Mitch, you emailed the board the contract for our medical advisor. Was that the latest one?
That was the one we had been working on for this last school year, yes.
Because it is expired.
And it's,
June 30th.
we need to bring it back to the board for approval again this school year.
Okay. So are we putting ourselves at liability not having the medical advisor under contract?
I don't know that we're at a liability.
Can you explore that for us, Mitch, and get back to us via email? And
Sure.
Just get the status of the contract. I don't know if it automatically renews or not.
It does not
Okay,
in the contract.
all right.
I mean, you bring it up, it's August 16th was the date.
Okay,
It's a short contract, you could read it quick.
okay. Do you have any more board communications?
Just the emails that we have, sad to say, somewhere not pleasant this time. 12 years on the board, and some of these emails were the worst ones I've ever gotten. And I just want to say
You go ahead. Yeah, I've got a lot of emails too. And the one thing that, kind of upsetting, a lot of people probably don't care if I'm upset. A comment from a medical professional was made to board members that we devalue women while our school district attorney was present. If that comment was true, our school district attorney, would have certainly addressed it. Since that comment is not true, it is slanderous and defamatory. And I think I'd like to see a statement from the superintendent and the board president that these comments are uncalled for and unnecessary.
Certainly in a public forum, I would agree that we want to make sure that we maintain a level of respect for everybody. And that being attacked is, I certainly received a lot of the same emails that the school board had, and yeah, some of the ones I received too were not necessarily flattering. So it's about trying to remain civil with each other when it comes time for discourse and disagreements.
It's also true that the First Amendment allows the freedom for the public during public comments to say quite a few things, including offensive things, as long as they're not, inciting or extremely threatening or violent. So I know a lot of people were offended by a lot of things last meeting, but that's all I have to add to that. Do you have anything else, Gary?
No.
Okay, John.
Similar to, as others mentioned, a lot of emails again. And once again, I did not respond to the emails I received, but I assure you, I have read every one of them, most of them multiple times, but did not feel like I could properly address the bulk or just given the number of emails that were coming through. So, but want people to know that they were read. Definitely noticed a sense of people feeling disheartened or disappointed in where we are at, not just with the masking decision, but the overall tone of some of the conversations that have gone on. And I've had a few more emails this time that were to address specifically to me as opposed to the whole board. And, just asking that we continue to be very thoughtful about how we approach this issue as we head into the school year.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say two things. So I had a couple of conversations with citizens Tuesday who obviously wanted me to vote different than I did, and they were good conversations. And they just wanted to reiterate that if they did leave their kids in Mineral Point School District, that they just want to make sure that bullying doesn't happen if their kids choose to wear a mask. And I totally agree with that. I think we have a tough policy anyway that will address that. So I just wanted to bring that up. The second thing, some of the emails, like everybody said, were nasty. And, somewhere I took, or they kind of said that because I voted differently than what Nurse Lindsay and Dr. Fox, recommended that, I don't respect them. That's the farthest thing from the truth. I respect what they do and everything they've given to us. So I just want to say that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations since Monday night. I've received a lot of emails. Several hurtful emails, a lot of name calling, which is unfortunate. And I think the worst one, there were worse name calls, but one person made the comment that it was the first time this board has ever cared about the emotional learning of children, and that is absurd. We're 2 months out from hiring an additional faculty member for that. And I'm all for everybody having an opinion and everybody having a different opinion than mine. But I urge people to be a little more pleasant when offering your opinion.
Hi, this is Dr. Cole from the Bachelor of Veterinary Service.
And just make sure we're not making attacks on this board that are not true.
We'd like to add that same letter writer also said that certain board members believe COVID isn't real. I don't know who that was being addressed to. I am on record, I believe at least 3 times. I know last August was his first time where I said, I totally believe it's real. And I know there was 2 other meetings after that I'm on record. So I don't know where the lies are coming from, but it has to stop.
Anything else, Andy?
Just a lot of fantastic emails. They weren't all, I don't mean to say they were all bad. It just the values the whole when we get ones that are simply the name call or the shameless.
Okay, I got,
Aaron?
okay, Bob, yeah, go ahead.
Bob, yep. Hi. I received, obviously the same emails everybody else received. Did receive a few addressed directly towards me. One thing I noticed coming up this time was a lot more talk about bullying. I believe, Justin, you mentioned bullying in one of your conversations as well. And I do believe we have a robust bullying policy. However, with the masks and COVID, I can tell you, as I was speaking last week, there were several people making faces at me and acting just really immature and unprofessional. And I can handle it. But if they're doing that to me sitting here on the board, what are their children, their family members, others doing to the children in school? So I think it's something we really need to be observant of and pay extra special attention because it is such a hot button issue. And we do know that people are very upset on both sides.
Thanks, Bob. Andy?
I forgot one, I apologize. In having a conversation with the a local citizen, it was suggested if we're going to ignore the advice of the school nurse and the medical advisor, that we should terminate them and stop spending the school's money because we're not using them properly. On that pass along. So. Passing out.
Thank you. I received probably close to 40 emails. The vast majority were expressing disappointment in the board's decision on Monday, or just simply urging that we reinstate a mask mandate. So, but I did read all the emails that I got, so thank you for that. One member did ask me to read a letter aloud, so I will do that. This is from Christy Cole, 3095 State Road 39, Mineral Point. Dear members of the Mineral Point School Board, I am sure that it does not come as a surprise to you that many in our community are disappointed in Monday's school board meeting. Your decision to disregard overwhelming expert advice on COVID mitigation measures, the disrespectful tone of some board members and citizen participants, and the lack of timely action to help families and teachers prepare for the school year may have both health and financial impacts of our district. On behalf of families and community members, a group of parents created and circulated a survey via email and publicly on social media to find out what those financial impacts might be. We are currently aware of 22 families with 42 children who are considering unenrolling from the Mineral Point School District if the elementary school does not start the year with a mask mandate while in a high level of community spread, and continue masking until rates are extremely low or a vaccine is available to 5 to 11-year-old children. One virtual charter school had so many Mineral Point applications pour in on Tuesday morning that they are trying to hire another teacher this week to accommodate everyone. Other students who open enrolled into Mineral Point for its excellent reputation are returning to their home districts. In light of this, we are again here to ask you to protect the health of our community, keep our educators and kids in Mineral Point, and keep the district financially strong. We want to keep our kids in the Mineral Point School District. We are part of this community. We do not want to see over $600,000 leave our district if we go. We have elected you and entrusted you with the health and well-being of our children and our entire school community. It is your responsibility to make decisions that are in the best interest of all children and staff of the Mineral Point School District. And lastly, I did get a phone call from a teacher in Belmont whose child will be enrolling in Mineral Point. He wanted to give me his opinion on the Belmont matrix that we use, which is one of the matrices, were referenced by some community members, and the proposed matrix tonight is based on. He said what he liked about the matrix was that the Belmont administration worked with the local county health department to devise it. What he didn't like about it is he felt like it was too relaxed, that cases in the school would be way too high before they start masking kids. And as a teacher in that school of kindergarten students, he was worried it's going to be too late. So that's just some feedback from a teacher of Belmont on the matrix pros and cons. And that's all I have. So we'll go to citizen communications. I have about 11 people signed up. And just for those of you who weren't at Monday's meeting, I'm just going to reread the brief ground rules from our board policy 187. Each registrant shall adhere to established procedures for the public comment period, and he or she shall retain all liability for his or her comments and conduct. Wait to speak until he or she has been recognized by the presiding officer. Limit the substance of his or her comments to the topics that are within the scope of the public comment period. Limit the duration of his or her comments to the allotted period of time, which is 3 minutes. Avoid engaging in conduct or making comments that are obscene, threatening, harassing, defamatory, or disorderly. Avoid making repetitive appearances before the board in which the same registrant or persons acting in concert present substantially the same information. Avoid engaging in political advocacy with respect to candidates of any elected office. Present their remarks verbally without the use of supporting material. And except where a person registers under established procedures as a spokesperson, no individual may present his or her public comments by proxy. Okay, with that said, we'll start with Caitlin Ulrich. Yeah, and Caitlin, maybe to step to like this area so people can see and hear you from remotely. Thank you.
So hi, I am Caitlin Ulrich. I'm the school psychologist for the district. I would like to state my support for the recommendations given by our state and local doctors, as well as the guidance given by the CDC for the use of masks by staff and students for K through 12th grade. I would like to ask that anyone here in the crowd or on Zoom that also agrees with these recommendations, could you please stand or use the raise your hand emoji? Thank you. I also am hopeful that everyone here can take a moment of pause and consider the amount of time and energy it takes to earn a degree in the medical profession. This is something that not only takes years to earn, but is a continual learning process. I trust our medical professionals in making decisions for our community regarding our well-being and thank them for their tireless efforts and service. I'm disheartened by the heckling, challenging tone, and disrespect that I heard at Monday's meeting, and I hope that that won't occur again. Please remember, we lead by example, and students are watching. Regarding the well-being of our students, I'm concerned that if masks are optional, our students' mental health will suffer and classrooms will be divided. Those who wear masks and those who don't. I spoke with students and staff last year in moments of stress over bringing home the virus to someone that they love, and their biggest worry was when others were not following the guidance of wearing a mask correctly. Please consider our students, staff, and community in your decision tonight regarding the matrix. And remember that we have state, local, and national professionals who have already made a recommendation and did not come to their decision lightly. Thank you.
Go first.
My name is Will Harris and I reside in Mineral Point. Some time ago, my wife and I went on an underground mine tour. Towards the end, the guide stopped and said, "We've got two options to end the tour. We can either take the safe and boring route, or we could take the adventure tour." Immediately, a few people shouted, "Adventure tour!" and nobody else said anything. The guide said, "Well then, we're taking the adventure tour." The adventure tour had us squeezing through boulders, ducking our heads. This is true. One older gentleman actually got stuck in a tunnel, and for a minute, we had to pull him out by his arms. After the tour was over, I asked the tour guide how often he went on the adventure tour versus the boring tour. He laughed and said, "Honestly, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never been on the boring tour." I asked him why he thought that was. He said that risk-taking people are the first to speak up. They usually speak loudly, while risk-averse people take time to calculate the risk and are less likely to speak up, which that meant in the heat of the moment, the adventure tour always won out. On Monday, I feel that you, the board, voted to take the children, teachers, and staff of this school on the adventure tour. What is at risk is their most precious asset, their health. Optional masking is not a compromise. Masking doesn't work unless everyone does it, because masks do not prevent 100% transmission of the coronavirus. But masks are effective at reducing exposures, especially when coupled with hand washing, social distancing, and other suggested measures. I'll speak for my family. Unless you can show me in the next hour or so that you are willing to listen to the public health experts and administrators you yourselves have hired, and you show me that you take the pandemic and masking seriously, my son will not be going on this adventure tour. Instead, after 181 years of the Harris family attending the Mineral Point School District, we will enroll him at Dodgeville, where they have a mandatory mask mandate. Now, not only will you lose the tax revenue that is assigned to my child, you will lose the volunteer hours my wife and I are willing to put into reading books to kids, going on field trips, and helping out as we can. We'll lose the money I would have happily donated to his classroom so that all kids would have the supplies they need and can participate equally. Most importantly, you will lose my son, who has put a lot of work into kindergarten. Put a lot of work to get ready for kindergarten. He participated in the 1,000 books before kindergarten programming at the public library, and he read 1,300 books.
Last sentence.
Last sentence. Thanks. He's supportive and friendly, and he'd be an asset to Miss Feinborn's kindergarten class. He's looking forward to in-person education in Mineral Point for a year now. Please reconsider the adventure tour. Thank you.
Caroni?
I'll stand over here and take my mask off. I'm the proud great-grandfather of a great-granddaughter who's coming into the first grade. And I'm very concerned about her. I wasn't here at the Monday meeting, but I did write an email to all of you. I can assure you it was respectful. I understood some people were not. If you follow Robert's Rules of Order, a member who voted in the majority could move for reconsideration of your decision. And I encourage you to think about that and do that. The reason I suggest that is that I don't really understand the rationale of the people who voted in the minority and in the majority, excuse me. And maybe you explained that on Monday and I wasn't here, but it's very hard to get that information since Monday. And so if you don't want to reconsider the motion, I encourage you to put on the record what the rationale is, especially with respect to elementary students who don't have the opportunity to get the vaccine. And they are most at risk. If you're 12 years old and older, as you know, they can have access to the vaccine. So I do encourage you to reconsider this. I think it's a very misguided decision that the majority of your members arrived at. And so please consider reconsidering and have a discussion on the motion to perhaps at least allow or require, masks for elementary students who are the most vulnerable. And if you don't do that, please put on the record what you're thinking so that the public will know. And if it's already on the record, I'll wait for the minutes. I just got the impression in reading about the board meeting that it was very ambiguous what motivated the decision. Finally, I just want to comment that generally boards prefer to defer to the administrators who you pay to make those decisions. And in this case, especially in this case, I think there's a very strong presumption that you would follow the administration and the medical advice. So to go against that, I think you should have a good reason. And I would like to know what it is. Thank you very much.
Lisa Hay. Again, please state your name and residence. I forgot to say that.
My name is Lisa Hay. I'm a resident and business owner in Mineral Point. I was on the Mineral Point School Board for 2 terms. So I empathize with all of you sitting here. I know that it's hard, and I appreciate you sticking your necks out there and being on the board. I just want to make 3 quick points. First, if whether there is a mask mandate is not a civil rights issue. I was a civil rights attorney for many years. And if you had in place a rule that's evenly applied to everybody, it's not a civil rights issue. If you said only boys wear masks or only people with disabilities wear masks, that's a civil rights issue. But if you have a rule that's evenly applied, it's not a civil rights issue. It's a safety issue. So my second point is safety. Many of the policies that you implement or issues that you decide as a school board have to do with safety. Safety is a very important issue in a school. A school is a special place. And when parents entrust the school with their children, they expect we're sending them to a safe place. So why we have fire drills, tornado drills. It's why we have cameras in the halls. That's a perfect example of student liberty. It's not unfettered. If there was total liberty, we wouldn't have cameras in the halls. Why do football players wear helmets? because we have safety rules. So when I was on the board, and I think what parents expect is when you're faced with a safety issue, err on the side of being more safe than less safe. The third point I want to make is that when you fill in the particulars of the matrix, which is what I understand you're doing tonight, although I couldn't hear the meeting that perfectly well, I hope you listen to the medical experts. You're fortunate to have Dr. Dunn here. Dr. Fox has been generous with her time. These two doctors, they understand these issues, and you would show them respect, which I think everyone would like to see, by listening to them. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Laura Bush.
I'm not sure if the speaker is Lisa. I do write it down. Dear members of the Mineral Point School Board of Education, I find myself writing to you for the second time within the space of 1 week regarding the same issue. In my first letter, you might recall that I told you about a professional development session that we participated in this week, led by a team consisting of both a Mineral Point High School teacher, Justin Leonard, and a recent Mineral Point alumnus, Kylie Owen. Within that letter, I used one of her analogies shared in her presentation to our staff. I urge you to be like a buffalo charging in a storm rather than running from it. Though harder and more intense at the start, they get through the storm together faster if they were each choosing their own paths and trying to get away from the storm. Like many others have shared, as a district, community, state, country, and world, we are weary of the stormy challenge still facing us from COVID-19. I request tonight that you push through that weariness, push past the often partisan and loudly held and defended beliefs on both sides regarding the pandemic and how to best navigate it as an individual. But instead, please focus on what you're truly here for, setting up schools and classrooms and equipping teachers and support staff to educate district students. We can all agree, I believe, that in classrooms is the best place for our students to be learning, especially now that we know we can keep them there safely by using precautions and safety procedures. I ask you tonight to please use the expert advice that you've been given from the National Academy levels, to the state and county levels, and certainly the advice that is coming from the most local level that we can get to. The physicians and medical professionals right here in our own community, serving and living among us. You as a board hired Dr. Fox to do a specific job, and she's doing it in a very thorough and professional manner. She has broken down very complex information that changes as we learn more about the virus itself, so that our school and community can easily understand and utilize it. Her recommendations are meant to be used as a guide that will keep us safely learning in person 5 days a week, which is what we are all striving to attain. She has tailored them with the help of Nurse Lindsay and the administrative team to fit the school environments and our specific district student population needs. Please use these recommendations in their entirety and not as a multiple choice offering as you create the matrix that will guide the district. If you should choose not to use the recommendations of Dr. Fox, Nurse Lindsay, the administrative team, and aforementioned medical experts, please be ready and willing to explain to parents, teachers, and the community how we, the district, will provide the free and appropriate education for all learners that we're bound to by law, including, of course, the population of students that I serve at the elementary and my own youngest child, all who are too young to have been given the opportunity to be vaccinated. Thank you, truly, for your time and for continuing to work together to serve and support the students and the staff of the Mineral Point School District and the community that surrounds it. Thank you.
Next is Ginny David.
Hello, I'm Virginia David. I live in Mineral Point and I'm a fourth grader at Mineral Point Elementary School. I'm talking to you today because masks are important. When I think about going to school, I think about having fun and learning. And I was able to do that last year while wearing a mask. When I think about going to school this year without a mask, I think about other people getting my best friends sick and about school being virtual again. If I were in a room with a lot of people without wearing masks, I would feel unsafe because if I weren't able to get COVID, I wouldn't be able to spend time with anybody else. I would learn better and be less nervous if we all had to wear masks. And I think the teachers might would too. If we do not start school this year with masks, my brother and I would feel safer doing virtual school. We do not want to do that because we want to learn with people we care about. Thank you for listening to what I have to say.
This is Bob May.
Stand a little more this way, so I don't have my back to these.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm Bob May, I live south of town here on County Road O. I'm not a speed trader. And I guess I would sympathize with the board. I reckon you probably all rather have a root canal than what you're going through now. And personally, I can see I'm way outnumbered by masked people tonight, and that's fine. One thing that surprised me starting out this meeting tonight, I was at Monday night's meeting. And the proudest moment for me was being a Mineral Point resident. You know, I think the first speaker speak about the tone. I didn't see that in the tone. Every single speaker that spoke was clapped for when they were done. Every single one. Whether I agreed with them or not, same here tonight. I don't agree with everybody here. I'm not gonna be your enemy when I walk out this door. Lisa, you and I've had contact in school board meetings that we didn't agree on, right? Oh, just like you. Hope that feeling's the same with you. I don't get this. If you don't agree with me, we cancel you and you're an idiot, or you know. The thing that probably bothers me the most is if you don't agree with what you folks have addressed as the science. There's two sides of this science. I know you can say there's only one science. There's as many doctors that would say, a couple times I've asked Dr. Fox, and I don't want you to think I'm picking on you, but you're a doctor. Okay, so I address you personally sometimes. So I would have a question for when I was in the school board meeting, I hope I can get this in 3 minutes. When I was in the school board meeting the first time when you all voted to whether you should or shouldn't get up, I thought you gave a very good speech. You had your mask on. I don't hear real good when people have their mask on. But one thing I've noticed, and I'm not making an accusation here, but when people give those speeches on your side of the issue, they never set a goalpost in concrete. Okay. I mean, I would ask you now, when you say let's wear a mask, do we just throw a mask on, or is there a certain kind of mask you wear? Okay, if you're that gung ho on masks, some doctors will say these masks are worthless. I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but nobody ever addressed that. Just get your mask up. Okay, so that's a question I'd have, and then my next question to you would be, and I'm not picking on you. My next question would be, at what point do we get to where you say, okay, it's safe now, let's take the mask off? There's no goalpost. And I personally think that's orchestrated. That's just my true opinion. Okay, now is Dr. Fox here?
I'm not sure. But she's back.
Hey, Dr. Fox, you kind of did the same thing. Again, I'm not picking on you. I don't even know. I had to ask who you were after the first. That's not to be offensive, but I didn't even know who you were. Okay, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and that's all I was trying to do the other night, is make sure that what I was repeating is the conversation you and I had. I think you brought up at that point there was a 40% vaccination rate. Is that kind of in the area where it was?
Roughly for the school,
Pardon?
for the school population.
Right, for the district.
Roughly.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, I remember.
You want to spend a couple more minutes, Bob, or you?
Pardon?
Your time's up. Do you need a few more minutes?
Can I?
Okay.
I don't expect any privilege anybody else got, but I think this is important.
I totally agree. I need to ask the board for consent, either unanimous or by board motion. Is anyone opposed? Bob, you want a couple more minutes, Bob? Bob online, are you okay with giving Bob a few minutes? We've got just a few more signed up.
That's fine.
Okay. Anyone else?
I don't
opposed?
feel I got the privilege of anyone else that I should talk about, but I think this is an important point. And this is directed not at, but to Dr. Fox. We're at the 40% level. So my question to you, like I asked Dr. I get you mixed up.
That's
Dr.
okay.
Dunn.
That's okay.
How long do we need to keep these masks on? Are we going to be pushing this next year at this time too? And you can say, well, that's ridiculous. A year and a half ago, we started this. It's going to be a 2-week lockdown. We're going to be good to roll. Well, that certainly isn't the case. Okay. So we're at 40%. What is it now, if I could ask?
It's less than 50%.
Less than 50. Okay. So I would just put you on the spot a little. At what vaccination rate are you comfortable to say, we're good to go, take the mask off? Or are we ever gonna get there? Do we just keep doing this forever? And nobody asks that question. It's like, they tell us to put our mask on, pull the mask up. And then look at the divide in our community. I walked out of that room the other night, I was so proud of Mineral Point, because every single person, I'd say they were 2 to 1, people that didn't want the mask mandated, was that close? Or optional?
Right.
I think I had to leave. I think, Andy, you made the push. Andy, you made the recommendation, right? The motion, okay. And I actually thought that was the fairest way, because there was people from both sides of the aisle. But now I hear the emails and I'm shocked. I mean, that's probably a little overused word, but I'm shocked at the, there's a bunch of you wearing masks. We don't agree. I don't hate you. I'm not gonna send you an email with cuss words in it, or, because that just degrades your intelligence and your ignorance, expose your ignorance. But I want some of those questions in. I don't want them avoiding and saying, well, okay, may I ask those questions? We're not gonna answer them, because to me, I don't mean to categorize, but you don't ever put your goalpost down and say, when we get to this point, folks, there'll be no more argument or point, we're gonna take the masks off. Why is that?
We'll talk about goalposts after the discussion, but thanks, Bob. Great
Thanks
question.
for the
Ashley Coyer. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, that's correct.
Most people do this.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Coyer, and I've been a resident of Mineral Point my whole life. My husband and I have 2 children. Our daughter is going into 3rd grade, and our son will be in 6th grade. I'm here tonight to specifically pick on Gary Sullivan. Just kidding, Gary. But I do want to say that Gary and I have known one another since we were kids. We went to school, church, and camp together, and I spent endless hours watching he and my husband, as well as the Mineral Point wrestling team, compete back when we were in school. And might I add, that was a long time ago. I'm outlining this background for you all tonight to give an example of how our small community can be so very supportive, even if we don't agree on every issue or belief. I think it's fair to say, and I think Gary would agree, that we generally haven't shared the same opinion about most issues now or growing up. But what I do know for a fact is if I called Gary and said, Gary, it's Ashley, and I need your help, he would not think twice before saying, what can I do? And I would do the same for him. The 2 of us are a micro relationship of our community, and I believe we represent the majority of the members of our community. I say that because I've witnessed it countless times. This community coming together to support a person, family, or group when they needed it, and the support has been astronomical. These relationships are the very strong base that provide us with the opportunity to look at each other as human beings, rather than opponents or enemies, and see and empathize with one another's concerns and point of view. We use these connections to find ways to compromise on both sides to help everyone feel that they are being heard and that their concerns matter. This ultimately can be a way to move forward where all those involved feel somewhat comfortable with the end decision. My personal concerns are regarding the students who are below the age of 12 who do not yet have the option or opportunity to be vaccinated. Masks optional in a population of students who have not been vaccinated puts them at a greater risk of contracting and becoming seriously ill from COVID-19. I understand that children generally have not been in the population of serious illness, but I don't want to find out if my child could be one of the small percentage of kids who do. I am requesting that until the vaccine is available to all ages, that children in grades 4K through 6 be required to wear masks. Once everyone has had the opportunity to be vaccinated, I would be comfortable with optional masking as long as we don't have a big outbreak in school or the community. In my opinion, this request is a compromise, because if I could have things my way completely, I would ask for masks to be required in all ages until COVID-19 was completely gone. I understand that there are others in the community who do not feel that this is appropriate, and I am trying to take their concerns into account.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. Regarding the grades 7 through 12, I feel they've had the opportunity to receive a vaccine if they choose to. So optional masking for them seems reasonable, as long as we're not seeing widespread cases. I want to close by thanking.
Go ahead, last sentence, go ahead.
I want to close by thanking the members of the school board for their time and consideration regarding these difficult decisions. I know it's been difficult. as well as Dr. Fox and Jane for their tireless efforts in supporting our students and community. And lastly, thank you to all the teachers, administration, and staff who've gone above and beyond during these unprecedented times. They have continued to provide a safe and educating environment for all of our students. Thank you.
That's Gary.
From Center Point. I'm gonna pull this down. I'm vaccinated, so I do feel comfortable. Last year, we followed protocols and heeded advice from educated, informed, respectable experts to keep our community safe from what was vastly unknown territory. We took every precaution. We wore masks, we social distanced, we had extensive group quarantines, virtual learning, we closed businesses, we canceled sports and other events. We closed our doors to keep COVID out. Those of you who don't know any one of the 4.5 million people that have died from COVID, could that not be a testament to the fact that we did all of those things? Could it be that those very protocols actually worked and kept the majority of our community safe? Those very protocols that we are eliminating almost completely at a time when the variant causes more infections and spreads faster. Let's talk about compromise. Many of you fought hard to keep in-person learning last year. Now that we're in person, that's not enough. Now you also want us to do it unmasked. We've not only eliminated the majority of the protocols that kept us safe last year, we've gone against not only our local doctors, the very people that have been there for us and our families, but we've gone against the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, among countless other experts. We're having discussions to allow in-person quarantine options and make other exceptions, and still, that's not enough. Now we know vaccines are limiting the spread. Vaccines and masks. For our 6th graders and down who are ineligible to receive the vaccine, their only defense is a mask. And you're trying to take that away from them. They don't get to choose. We have to choose for them. And taking away their best defense makes them part of an experiment that they didn't sign up for. What kind of example are we setting for our children? If you ask a child why he or she wears a mask, you'll get responses like, because it keeps me safe and it keeps others safe. If you ask a child why he or she isn't wearing a mask, the responses are much more negative. It's hot, it's harder to breathe. I hate wearing masks. None of which any of us would agree with. But my child is told that all those things aside, it's still the right thing to do. I feel confident that I would survive COVID, and I'm fairly confident that my kids would as well. But I tell my kids it's not about me. It's about doing what's right for the greater good of our community and our friends. I'm not here to argue against any of you, and I'm sorry that you all feel so battered from unkind words. You are my friends, and you are all my community, and I care about each and every one of you. I'm here to ask you to please make a matrix that keeps all our kids in school. Thank you.
Next is Wendy.
Sorry, I didn't know I wasn't getting recorded.
There's people online, so as long as they can see it, yeah, you're good.
Would have printed it out if I was Zoom. Okay, so I tried really hard and practiced this multiple times to keep it under 3 minutes. If I read really fast, I can, but that also sounds aggressive, and that's not my point. So I'm gonna slow down, and I'm really sorry if I go over the 3 minutes. So I'm gonna
Introduce
talk.
yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm Wendy. I'm a resident of Mineral Point, but my kids do not go here. I'm just here to help represent a different perspective. So I was here Monday night. And every person had 3 minutes to speak. They were all super kind. And I also disagree. I don't think there was any rude comments. I don't think there was any bad blood per se anywhere. I thought it was actually really respectful. Anyways, but you know, after everybody had 3 minutes, Dr. Fox had a mic for hours and her opinion was drilled into the ground and into your guys' ears. And with no chance for anyone like myself being able to counter any lie or thing that we do not agree with. So like, I know you voted for optional masks and I think that's fantastic, but then it really got confusing. It seemed like there was a lot of wavering
And so my following comments are going to be, I don't understand where you guys stand with this. So, Ms. Fox, I don't mean to sound like I'm picking on you, but since you're the only doctor that they're listening to, you're going to hear your name. So, Dr. Fox, I'm so sorry that you have been blinded in fear and that you are so completely worried about this virus. That is something that you shouldn't have to worry about. I pray for all of you that are that afraid of this. Yes, kids in districts that less than 15 minutes away attended in school, including my kids, every single day, all 5 days a week, the whole entire year. So yes, there are plenty of opportunities to learn how others did it better. My children didn't miss a single day out of school except for when they had a cold. So we stayed home, got better, and went back to school. Our school's success had nothing to do with the masks or all the disgusting cancerous chemicals that are being sprayed everywhere. I'll save that for another meeting in 10 years when schools are being sued for cancer. The success came from our parents. We did what we needed to do for our own kids. Our kid was sick, we kept him home. And then we brought him back again. We weren't judged, we weren't docked. We needed to be home, we needed to be home. Your school literally missed the most school out of any neighboring school around. Like literally every school did a better job handling COVID than yours did. And I say that with love completely. The fact that you are singling out one doctor for an option or an opinion for protocol presents sheerly on the decision of masks being forced, to me is mind-boggling. Any adult with any common sense knows that if you were ever diagnosed by a doctor with something that was, especially if it was life-altering, that you would get another opinion, or at least 3, because history has shown more than often that doctors can be wrong. And she only has one intent here, and it's very clear, that is to force masks on everybody. Not only has she been using COVID as really a scare tactic since day one, she's a family doctor. She's not a biologist, she's not a virologist, she's not an epidemiologist. She does not work for OSHA, and most importantly, she's not an industrial hygienist. If you don't know what that is, please look it up. You obviously have no idea about the PCR tests that are dipped and covered in a substance called ethylene oxide, which is a cancer-causing substance.
Would you like to appeal for more time?
Please.
How much more do you have?
Probably 3 minutes. I'm going to try to.
3 minutes more?
I've been slowing down so I didn't sound. Sorry.
Okay, so
If that's okay.
We've got an appeal for 3 more minutes.
You gave everybody 2 the other night.
Okay, it was kind of variable, but it was
Right.
fun to do it round 2. So,
Just so we're consistent.
okay, I'm fine with that. So
Okay.
the board wants to give her 2 minutes.
Sure.
Okay, Bob, are you opposed?
Not opposed.
Okay. 2
Okay.
minutes, Andrew, thank you.
So, which is covered in a cancer-causing substance. Also, everyone needs to understand that there are carefully engineered oxygen control units that are installed and inspected in all hospitals that control environments to ensure surgeons that are wearing masks that can breathe properly. Because as real scientists know, the loss of oxygen severely compromises your critical thinking. The kids can get used to adjustment like the doctors? No, absolutely not. They are proven and have already established drugs, vitamins, vaccinations, and not the ones they're pushing on you right now, and therapies that can help and have helped in a huge positive way on COVID patients. The studies are everywhere. I've got 47 of them in my backpack if you would like them. And for anyone that says that the opposite, you're literally hiding in a cave. We will not eradicate COVID. It's absolutely impossible. I also have a tube of ivermectin in my case as well that is for animals, because animals as well as humans have COVID and we have had it for decades. This is not new. The CDC, after 1.5 years, still has not been able to single out the COVID-19 virus. Also look up the case that King versus Alberta, Canada, because he won that case because of said thing, and now COVID-19 no longer exists in Alberta, Canada. Ignorance in a court of law will not protect you. I didn't know that will not be a defendant, but it will convict you. Look at who is charged and executed after the Nuremberg trials. Teachers, doctors, nurses, police, anyone that was going along with their narrative and saying that it was safe and that you must do this. The decisions tonight, I hope, will not waver. These parents and students and staff decide or deserve the right to make an informed decision on what they're subjecting their kids to for the next 9 months. We do not consent to any medical decisions you are trying to make or any test you are trying to force upon our children now and going forward. When it all boils down, this is about choice and freedom. My body, my choice. We live in the United States of America, the best country on the planet. We are sovereign human beings and you cannot and will not take that away.
Thanks, Mindy.
I know what side of history we will be on, I will be on. I hope you guys are on the same history as well.
Thank you. We got two more, is that right, Angie? Wayne Kennedy, Wayne Kennedy.
Wayne Kennedy, I'm from south of Mineral Point here. Over this past few times that I've been to these meetings, we've had a lot of discussion. Unfortunately, what has bothered me about all this discussion is it's all based on emotion and how emotional responses to the COVID instead of data. I had a long conversation with my son just as that's coming today, and he said, Dad, you gotta get the data out. You gotta get the data out. You gotta get the data out. Guess what? I didn't get enough time to put the data out. I'm not a good data person anyway. Dad, and his son was here, he was done. Gotta get the data out. But we heard a lot of things that in this last couple of times people would make statements, and I hold my mouth because I didn't agree with those statements. And the reason I didn't agree with those statements is because I've been listening to some data. I've been listening to some things that people are saying. I haven't just been listening to the doctors or these doctors or the CDC. I'm tired of listening to the CDC because they started out, well, no masks, then masks, and then 2 or 3 masks. And it comes, well, okay, what are we going to listen to? Are we going to listen to this one? Or are we going to listen to when he said it this time? Or are we going to listen to when he said it that time? And pretty soon you get kind of, But schools are based on scientific method. Is that true? That's one of the things that we teach, or we should be teaching, I think, in our schools. I looked up scientific methods, and scientific method is based on observation first, and then testing of the observation. In the past 18 months, anytime anybody ever came out saying anything contrary to the narrative, and I get passionate, I'm sorry. Anytime anybody comes out with anything contrary to the narrative, that narrative is taken down. That narrative is not allowed to go on Facebook. There's been many times, some of you know that I'm a preacher, I'm a pastor. And there's been many times that after I got through church, we have our service on Facebook, that people came to me and said, oh, Pastor, you shouldn't have said that. They're bound to take you off. And I'd say, yes. My son would come and say, Pastor, Dad, don't say things like that. They're going to take you off. Why? Because I'm giving an opinion that is contrary to the opinion that has been given, the big opinion that is given. And so all I'm asking tonight, I haven't heard anything hardly at all in this whole time. All I'm asking is instead of making an emotional appeal, because we can all make an emotional appeal. I can come out and say, we found out that, I heard just recently, I can't prove it. Well, they found out that, I'm going to finish in this last
sentence. Go ahead. 10
We
seconds.
found out that now I got all frustrated.
I'm sorry.
We found out that the IQ went down this past year because of kids wearing masks. So that's what they said. Now I can't prove that, but if that's true, if that one thing is true, then we should be really looking at it and saying, should we have masks?
Thanks. Last one is
Larry,
Matt Renner.
mine is muted from his speech.
Who's that? What's that?
For us? No.
That's what the kids are being told.
We're not hearing audio.
The
They're
microphone
not
is,
hearing the audio.
Bob Janetti, can you hear
Yep,
us?
everything's coming in loud and clear for me.
I don't know, some people at home listening are not being able to hear it.
So
Okay.
the other night I was home, is it okay if I tell them what? And I had to get out of Zoom and then start back over a couple of times, and then all of a sudden it worked. They didn't do anything different, but it could just be a connection.
A connection. Okay.
That's what I did.
Hi, Matt Renwick, principal at the elementary school. After the decision, first, thank you for serving. I appreciate what you do. Our goal is just to make it safe for everyone in the schools and have in-person 5 days a week. That's our goal. After the meeting on Monday, someone had asked about surveying teachers and staff. Just, what are they concerned about at this point? So that's just what I want to share here. So I have 8 different questions. The first one is just, will close contacts have to quarantine? And I know that'll be addressed later, so I'm not going to get into that, but I wanted to share that question. One concern I just want to point out, though, for the board is last year we hired virtual teachers. We had virtual people handling a lot of that work. And now it could be upon the teachers to be doing simultaneous learning. And, if we have no masks, it could be more kids being quarantined. That's a concern I have. Number 2, if kids are at home, will we need like a full subscription to Zoom? We've talked about using Google Meet, which is part of our Google Suite, but Zoom seems to work very well for kids and teachers, so that's just a cost we may want to anticipate. Number 3, should we partner with the virtual school for some families? I know Mitch and the event team have been looking into that. I believe it's like $4,000 to $6,000 per student. But yes, we are looking into that. I want to note that masks are free. So far, I know Christy Cole mentioned they could have up to 40 some kids out. Right now we're at 20, so that's at around 1 class so far, 1 grade or 1 class in a grade. And I just have a concern too about the families that can't do virtual learning or homeschool learning. Both parents work. What are they supposed to do if you have a single parent? That's a tough situation. If you don't have a virtual option, if you're constantly, going back and forth with quarantines, it's tough for them. Number 4, what are the virtual expectations if we have no masks? Meaning, how will we keep up with increased quarantines? How much work are we expected to get? How quickly are we supposed to get it out? That's a big concern for staff, and it's stressful for the families too. That concept coming in and back and forth. Number 5, are visitors allowed this year in the school? If there's no masks. I think about my front office staff and people coming in and out, not wearing masks. We already have that with, if we have no masks in the school. That's something to think about. Number 6. Number 6. Are we making this too complicated, the matrix? And I just ask that. I still support the following the previous recommendations of just going all masks for right now. And if we get down the road, we want to do a matrix, that's great. But I also understand the pressure you're under. And if the mask is a compromise, then I get that. So I'm not unsupportive of that situation. I have 2 more. Can I go for 2 more?
Yes. Everyone okay with that for 2 more?
2 more questions.
Bob Janetka was giving.
He's had 2 more points from Mr. Renwick. Is that okay, Bob?
Oh, yep. I just said yep.
Thank you. This is more my question is, why are the masks the only tool of concern? A distance of 3 feet, no one's brought that up. Washing hands, those things have never been brought up as a concern. Now, this is just a piece of fabric over your face. It's a tool, and we need all our tools this year to be successful. So please let us be, give us all the tools we can use. The last question is, how long will we be wearing masks? That's, teacher brought that up too, that Mr. May had also asked. I was reading Pulitzer Prize winner Ed Young. He's a science reporter for The Atlantic. And what he just says is we're trying to give our kids time. Give our kids, they're going to be asking for the vaccine within a month, it sounds like. End of the September emergency use, we hope. Because that's all we're asking for, is just to give us that time, literally months, so that our youngest kids can have access to the vaccine. And that, I don't know if that's the goalpost, but that certainly is a benchmark that I think will help us be more safe. So again, thank you for all you do, and thanks for listening.
Okay. Anybody online who wants to make a public comment or raise your hand with the raise your hand icon, and it's already been said. You can just make it brief and say you agree. Nothing, Mitch?
I'm not seeing anything.
Let me see it. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, thank you. That ends the public comment period. We will enter items for discussion and information. Do we have any items simply for discussion?
No.
Okay. So we'll go into action items, the COVID protocol, and specifically the matrix for adjusting the masking guidelines. So first of all, Mitch, if you want to pull up the proposed protocols and the matrix that the administration has suggested to the board. The matrix is basically what the goalpost would be in terms of at which data point, data threshold would we require masks or keep them optional, et cetera. So that's going to be helpful to administration and to communities, parents, so they know when we would adjust things. Before we dive into that, Mr. Wainwright, can you read the point over face coverings that talks about which types of masks are allowed or not allowed? That's it. That's in the current protocol proposed.
Second to last bullet.
Sure. When it talks about bandanas, gaiters, and masks with exhaust valves are not allowed as they provide minimal protection for the wearer and those around them. And there's a lot of similarities to some of the things this year that we had used last year. Students may be exempted from wearing face coverings due to special behavior, individual needs, or due to documented medical conditions. That was the same thing that we had used last year.
There was also a question about allowing visitors, I think.
Right.
Second point there under face coverings.
All building visitors ages 5 and up will be required to wear masks inside all district buildings.
So does that imply that visitors will be allowed?
Based on the current standard and your adoption of this protocol, then that would be the case.
Okay. All right. So can you just introduce the rest of the protocol and say if there's been any revisions from Monday night, and then we can go into the discussion of the matrix.
Well, again, I guess, Mr. Renrick brought up the question about is masks the only thing? No, we still have the same disinfecting UV lights. We still have hand washing stations. Those protocols will still be in place. So good hygiene, which we all felt certainly helped us when it was strep throat season. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and she didn't have any of those things that she had to worry about this year because of so much social distancing, hand washing, just good hygiene practices. So those things would still be a part of what we would be asking students and staff to be doing. Some of the things that changed, try to pull it out and clarify it a little bit more. Whether it's classroom or non-classroom exposures, if it's student to student, there are some different variations, and this is based on, my apologies to those that are anti-CDC, but they're based on the CDC recommendations. So for students, it's 3 feet. So if you're at least 3 feet or further away, then that is not considered a close contact. And we talk about if both students are masked, how do you go about the quarantine protocol? You are socially distanced indoors, you're masked. When you are unable to socially distance, then there's a quarantine of 14 days. If you are further than 3 feet, you are not considered that close contact. There is no quarantine because you don't fall under that definition. We have the ability to administer some of the testing here at school. We also have the ability to bring in additional sources or resources if that's needed in order for people to stay in the school. If it's an optional, then that's social distancing. So if I'm masked and Mr. Bush is not, and we're closer than 6 feet, that's the social distancing comes back to that. So according to the CDC guidelines, if everybody's masked, social distancing is 3 feet. If not everybody is masked, then it's 6 feet. And then again, 14-day protocol. Can you be with an antigen test or a PCR test on day 7? Can return masked, can participate in sports and co-curriculars for any of the high school, middle school staff, as long as they remain masked while they're under that still 14-day window. For the adults, again, following the CDC guideline, close contact is 6 feet. Now, it's been a long time since I've been in the classroom, but I don't ever remember staying at least 6 feet away from all my students. You circulate the room, you're working with students. So it's going to be very difficult, but for staff that are vaccinated, they are still a close contact, but they may stay in school if they wear their mask. And that's for the vaccinated staff people. They will need to be tested after their last exposure, a negative PCR test, at least day 4 after that exposure, and then still monitor for symptoms along the way. If a staff member is unvaccinated, and I don't know if everybody can see that, so you're still, if you're less than 6 feet, you must quarantine at home. You may return to school on or after day 8 after the last exposure, as long as you have a negative PCR test, no symptoms, and the staff member remains masked. So there are a few more guidelines that the adults would have to follow. So just trying to clarify some of those kinds of things. We would follow the standard contact tracing. The county, when this first started, the county used to do all the contact tracing. Now the county identifies individuals to the school district, and the school district is responsible for doing the contact tracing. That has not changed. I think probably the thing that everybody would want to see, and kind of that when we talked about, or when you talked about a matrix on Monday night, you made some comparisons to some of the matrix you've seen other school districts use. There have been some suggestions as to how to make this based on board member suggestion. You know, what kind of ranges are we looking at? What areas, what kind of numbers, what are we going to use? Monday night, it was said to use the school district zip code as the place that we would get our information for. So if you look on the screen, you can see kind of the green, yellow, and red, kind of like the stoplight. So for elementary students up through 6th grade, this is what would apply to it, because the 6th graders don't have the opportunity to have the vaccine yet. If the zip code cases per 1,000 for 100,000 over 7 days are anywhere between 0 to 49, so in essence, it's 3 cases or less in our zip code. Then that's, well, just kind of bear with me here a little bit. Then masks are optional at the elementary school. If cases are between the 550 and 200, or 3 to 9 cases, masks would be required. You're in the yellow. And anything over 200 or 10 or more cases, then masks would be required at that elementary school level. Quarantine protocols for elementary students, they would allow for quarantine for classroom and non-classroom exposures in the school. So students would not have to stay home during that time, but they would be asked to wear a mask. So if they are exposed, close contact, they could still be in school and continue to wear a mask. For the 7 through 12 students, the same numbers apply, but the masking requirement changes a little bit. Under green, masks optional. Under yellow, masks would be recommended. And under the red standard, masks would be required. So again, if it gets up to that 10 or more cases in the zip code, or the number of students that have had to quarantine. So it's an either or. If it's less than 10% of the students, staff in a building, then masks still remain optional. If it's between 10 to 20%, masks would be required at the elementary and recommended in the 7 through 12 building. And if it's above 20%, then masks would be required at either one of the buildings. The information, and I'm going to stop sharing this screen for a second. The information comes from Wisconsin Department of Health website. So this is our current county conditions, last updated August 26th at 2 p.m. Yesterday we were in the red. So in a day's time, it's moved from red to yellow. The recommendation is to look at what the zip code count would be on a Friday to kind of help gear those decisions. So you're looking at you have more of a week's worth of data by looking on Friday at this particular website. We would certainly post this website. Anybody could look at it, see the data anytime they want. They would just have to click on the zip code tab and then type in the 535 zip code, and it would bring you to this area.
Can you just read to the crowd if they can't see? What's that say?
So
I don't know if everybody can see it.
So
everybody understands.
In the 53565, the total confirmed cases reported within this zip code over the last 7 days per 100,000 people is 43.4. That equates to 2 cases. So that's how it would kind of get translated into the matrix for making decisions. If something, the proposal that was put together says if we're in the same location for 2 weeks, then you would move to that next level down. If it's going up, if we move from a yellow to a red, the recommendation would be to look at making a switch at the end of that week.
So just so everyone's clear, that if school were to start in 2 weeks and we're using this matrix, if we start at 2, masks are not required at the elementary.
At the elementary in yellow, they would be required.
But I'm saying there's only 2, right? So if
Right.
I'm looking at this graph right.
Not yellow on the chart, yellow on the map.
Sorry, yellow on the map, yes.
But the 2 weeks stands still, so the 2 weeks in a row would stand, we'd look at a retrospect, since we start Wednesday.
Yep.
We'd have data from tomorrow and data from a week ago, and those would be the 2 weeks we would use to determine what next week's plan would be.
So that would be what we would look at for the 7th of September.
And for the elementary school, then we would use tomorrow's data and we'd use the data from September 2nd to determine if we're wearing masks on September 5th when we go to school.
Yeah, the 7th, yes.
Or 7th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Wainwright, can you talk briefly about there were some questions about thresholds for closing the school and concerns about how long we would have to close the school if cases started to overwhelm the community and overwhelm the students and staff. Can you refer to that part of the protocol that talks about that and how you might have come to that suggestion?
Yeah, in the instructional models, in the rare case, the district may have to temporarily close school buildings for in-person instruction at the discretion of district superintendent. I would certainly not make that decision in isolation. If there's significant spread or exposure of COVID-19 within the school, and the reason we would ask for a very temporary would be to allow for the contact tracing. So it may be I need another 24 hours to allow for contact tracing to take place, depending on what level of masking the school building and the district were in at that time. Once we have the ability to do the contact tracing, and we know who should come back to school, who should come back to school with a mask. But our goal is to try to stay in school 5 days a week with all of our kids and all of our staff.
So what you're saying is if we're able to identify all close contacts, then we can allow them according to the protocols, the ones that would qualify for in-school quarantine, they would come back to school. And the building wouldn't necessarily be closed for any more than that time that it would take to identify the close contact. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then just the other, if you keep going there, I think it talks about just ability to staff. Can you talk about that a little bit?
We have probably the same issue every other school district has when it comes to substitute teachers. I popped on the news this morning and saw a little story that Channel 27 was doing about teacher shortages. Some of the school districts around us don't have teachers for the start of the school year. And teachers in math, they don't have teachers in science. So there's a shortage for classroom teachers, and we have a shortage for subs, just like every other school district does. So if we get to the point where I don't have enough subs, if I have to quarantine a staff member at home and I can't cover classrooms, if that number gets too excessive, then I don't know what to do, because I can't provide the education in face-to-face format. And I would be asking for an opportunity for us to go virtual if we got to that situation.
So what are the total numbers? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what are the total numbers of students in each matrix?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but I would say the 4K5 building is about 350. And I would say pretty close to that in this building, maybe a little bit more, give or take, between that. And that would be 6 through 12 in this building. You're looking at, if you're looking at percentages, that's what you're talking about 35 students at the elementary school would be optional. If it gets higher, we're talking about a mask requirement there. Obviously, that number is going to be a little bit higher here in the 712 location.
So back to the school closure protocol, it says that closures longer than 1 day of duration require board approval of administration. Approval of administration plan. Okay, so if you don't have enough subs and you can't resume school after a day of closure, that would need emergency approval by the board to
Yes.
close for longer than 1 day.
Yes.
Okay.
So just to make, because we're talking about finding a compromise here between a lot of different opinions, I'd like to point out that this recommendation that we're looking at right now, the high school going to a mask requirement, that number is now 20 times higher than it was. The caseload is now 20 times higher than it was in the initial proposal that we looked at. So for anybody who feels like maybe the compromise isn't there from requiring masks, we are definitely moving towards on opening that up. And I guess in return, I might ask if there's any appetite to add in a clause that at the elementary school level, that we would require masks regardless of caseload up until 6 weeks after a vaccine is available. That is a theme that I have heard repeatedly, and that I think would provide at least a subset of our population a great deal of reassurance or comfort. So is that something we'd be willing to discuss or put into a proposal?
I think it's certainly valid. Several people mentioned basically our 7th graders or seniors have had the opportunity to choose, if they so choose, to get vaccinated. And the requirement is a little different for masking. Once our younger students have that same opportunity to try to mirror the two masking pieces, makes good sense.
I guess my concern is 3 cases is like 0.1% of the population. And September 28th of last year, the mask policy went into effect and cases went up for almost 2 months after that, based on that data Joni provided. I mean, 3 cases to me, what about the appetite of changing or to and?
We're at Justin.
In the center here between between the zip code data and the percentage of students positive or quarantined, change this or, so that you need both of those things to change the masking level? Is that what you're saying?
Correct, because I just hear the sentiment too about, the goalpost changing. Because back in June, when we repealed it, we were at the lowest of the low. And it was still, well, we should keep masking. So it's like, personally, when does it stop?
Right.
Just my observation.
Right.
And this is merely a template for you to discuss and decide the numbers to move, change based on what you wish.
Sure. So we've seen some information from some surrounding schools, and I'm thinking River Valley, Shellsburg, Belmont, Cuba City. What did you learn there, Mitch? I mean, there was a board's request to kind of investigate what they're doing.
I think this is a little bit wider scope as far as like our numbers and ranges and things compared to some of those other.
But this, along with Justin's comments, is more restrictive.
Than some of those other school districts?
Correct.
I think
and
for
the other-
some of them that it would be more restrictive, for others, it's not as restrictive, yes.
To be clear, I think the four that I named off were going off of school numbers, not zip code or community
and
numbers.
And the zip code came from the discussion on Monday night. That
Right.
was not my saying, so it was.
Right. And I think maybe we ought to have that discussion again. And has there been any rethinking by the administration, maybe going back to the school numbers?
I don't think there's an issue what we choose or what you choose. It will be what we follow based on how you want the template. So if it comes down to how many cases are in the elementary school building, and that determines what level of masking or if there's a need to shut down, or same thing in this building.
Sure.
There's, as Bob said, there's the goalpost and we know what it is, so we know what we're aiming for.
I know. And thinking back, I'm thinking maybe the board possibly acted on that a little too quickly on the community versus the school. Just one advantage going by the school numbers, if there was a rise in the elementary school and we had to shut the elementary school down because of a couple families, hypothetically, okay, we could really still run the middle high school if we were to use the school numbers.
So what I counter, I'm not disagreeing. I like the thought of being able to split the schools, but what I counter that with is if we're thinking at all about caseload, the smaller the population gets. So at a county level, we could have like 50 cases, but when we go to zip code, it's down to 5 cases. And it's the same overall caseload. If we go to just our school, one case is gonna take us from green to red.
Well, with this recommendation.
With this recommendation, but how far, like I said, we're already looking at 20 times what the original, at the high school level, we're already 20 times what the original recommendation was. So are you saying we should go 200 times above what that original recommendation was, or 2,000? Or
Again, I'm looking at area schools, and if certainly they are consulting with their experts, I don't think their boards are just doing it on their own. And this is what I understand is they're at about 5% of positive cases within the school. That may include employees also, and that would change our dynamic somewhat here too.
so I'm looking at the one I happen to have up is directly to the south of us. And yet their moderate transmission is 2.1 to 5%. And in my mind, 5% of the school being COVID positive seems like a lot. That
I would not support 5%, especially at the elementary school.
makes me apprehensive, but I'm one of 7, so please keep talking.
If it's
I'm not
300, if it's
squelching
355%, you're looking at 17 to 18 kids.
So this school district is doing the exact same thing that Belmont, Shellsburg, Cuba City did. They consulted with the county health department, Lafayette County. and they came up with the matrix with county input. And this is, basically the original matrix that was proposed on Monday was with Iowa County Health Department input. This follows the guidelines that our county experts recommend, and it is much stricter than what's being proposed tonight. And I don't support just following school cases, because by the time COVID's in the school, we're too late. And what we need to do is we need to be proactive as it's coming into the community and getting into households, parents getting sick, taking it from work, and then getting into the kids and then bringing it to school. We need to have, it's my opinion that we should have a proactive approach, which allows us to use community data to see what's coming. And then, if despite cases being low, we're uniquely infected in the school, that's important too. And so that's why I feel like having them either or gives us some flexibility. But the main point I wanted to make is this school district is doing exactly what Belmont and Schultzburg and Cuba City did. We're just coming to different conclusions based on input from different county health departments. And I can't explain that.
That is a very good question. Why are we so different then between the two counties that, and actually, there are, and I don't know how many kids we have living in Lafayette County that come to our school district, but there's a number.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that the county said you should do this and the school said we don't want to do that. So let's hash it out. And maybe they came to some kind of compromise. And that's basically, kind of where we're at tonight, where what the county has recommended did not pass on Monday by the 4-3 vote. And so, the administration is
Would it be helpful for the board to look at last year's on, I don't know, a couple of days throughout the year and see where we were at and see, according to last year, with this proposal, would either building be eligible for optional math? I know things are different from last year to this year.
I did look
would
at
it be easy to?
Davidson historical zip code data that's on the DHS website, and so you can track back on the number of daily cases on a 7-day average. And so we would have been, starting the last week of March, we would have been in the green zone and would have been there through the end of May, or through the end of the school year, and then the early part of summer school as well, until the end of July when our cases rose.
In the elementary school or in the middle high school?
I guess I'm talking about zip code data. I'm not talking about our case data in the school. Our case data in the school was overwhelmingly the vast number of positives we had were in November, December.
So what was just shared for those of you at home, I don't know if you heard, was that last year, remember Steffes had asked if we were using this kind of guideline last year, and Dr. Fox shared based on the zip code, we would have been in the green from March to the end of the school year. So it would have been, masks would have been optional last year based on zip code case counts, and the numbers were very low in the school at that point in time as well.
I'll say, I really don't have much problem with the matrix because it does focus on the elementary kids. One of you two, can you explain, if we go ahead with these quarantine, which differs from vaccinated, unvaccinated.
Yeah.
Can we be sure that we won't have a lawsuit on our hands? I think because of the separation that we might have. That's all I'm asking.
As far as I understand, we've had this vetted.
Okay.
Administration and our school attorney.
Okay. I just don't want to,
I get you.
Put the district in a position.
Absolutely not. Mr. Bush, this was your, you kind of got us to this point with your motion. Do you want to?
Hey, can I say something too?
Weigh in on it? Yeah, go ahead.
When they talk, when we talk about the goalpost, this is not something I would ever suggest right now or ever vote for this motion. But there are 9 districts in the state of Wisconsin that have gotten rid of all protocols. Oconomowoc just did that. Waukesha has none. A school of 13,440 students has no COVID protocols. So we're pretty fortunate that we could sit here and even talk about 3 cases, we're putting masks on kids.
Hey, believe me, I'm grateful that we have someone like Dr. Fox who, a healthy administration, follow the CDC guidelines and put something like this together. That's very, very complicated.
One question I have is if we go to, if both schools are, the numbers are high enough where we have to be, let's say, universal masking, will we move to that for the quarantine?
Yes.
Yes.
So when universal masking is in effect, then the protocols that are applied when all students are masked will be in effect in terms of the definitions of the close contacts, meaning that if both contacts are masked, then as long as they're greater than 3 feet away, then there would be no quarantine.
And if they were close contact and both masked, they could basically quarantine in school.
Yes.
So
With optional masks, the vaccinated and unvaccinated kids will be able to tell who's vaccinated and unvaccinated by wearing masks, I guess, longer. One has 3 to 5 days, one has 7 days, and taking a PCR test. So there's actually two different events that parents, teachers, and kids will know. Medical information on kids. To me, is that HIPAA?
If masks are optional, I would say no.
If we're dressing some kids with masks and some without based on their vaccination status.
Let me liken it to this, Larry. Let's say there's a kid in elementary school with a severe peanut allergy, anaphylaxis. And so a letter goes out to all the parents and says, please do not bring nuts to school. Or let's say in that classroom, please don't bring nuts to school for a snack because we have a peanut allergy.
Yeah, that's a real possibility
in the room. And so it's applying a rule based on a health issue that a certain student has without.
Well, you don't identify a student with a peanut allergy either.
Well, but when the student, the student who's the close contact, they have the option of either testing and masking at school or doing their quarantine outside of school, right? So isn't that, aren't we giving them the choice in that sense that if they don't want to be identified in a way that makes them feel like they're being singled out, they can choose to take their quarantine out of the building?
I'm going to answer that. Is it okay to answer?
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, so you're saying you're going to use my taxpayer dollars to teach a vaccinated kid without a mask, but my taxpayer dollars can't teach a unvaccinated kid in person without a mask. I believe that is crossing the line.
That's a great perspective.
And that would be a
Crossed
HIPAA
my mind.
violation. Now, this is my opinion. I think a junior attorney could run with that one and win.
Larry, this is just my take on this too, regarding the privacy of the health information. Just because somebody's wearing a mask, remember, if it's mask optional, they could choose to wear it even if they didn't have to. They would only have to share that they're required to wear the mask if they wanted to.
Okay. Mr. Bush, you want to weigh in on this?
I'd like to ask Nurse Lindsay what she thinks about it. I'd like to ask Nurse Lindsay what she thinks about it. She deals with it frequently in schools, I think.
Nurse Lindsay, can you address the question of? Okay. Can you just come up here a little bit? The question is about whether.
Are we violating HIPAA?
if a student's on quarantine and a vaccinated one can come back early without a mask,
If they test negative.
if they test negative, does that somehow identify them as being vaccinated, which reveals personal medical information?
No, because the masks are optional.
What about a student who was quarantining in the building though, at a time when masks are optional, but they are required to wear a mask because they were a close contact? Are we then identifying that student as unvaccinated and therefore violating their HIPAA protections?
Not unless they tell somebody or a staff member tells somebody, you have to wear a mask, you're on quarantine. So I suppose if the child wasn't wearing the mask, we would have to discreetly remind them that they have to wear it. And if they don't, they would have to quarantine at home.
And these protocols, these are based on CDC guidelines, is that correct?
DHS is the document that we looked at.
DHS guidelines,
Which
okay.
pulled from CDC.
Okay, so the state health department is recommending these guidelines differentiating between vaccinated and unvaccinated students.
Correct. And every school nurse that I've talked to is.
It's following this. Okay. For me.
And I'm not here to argue the point that the board changes. I'm just offering up my opinion.
Totally.
Yeah.
I have no problem with your question.
I'll support it, but all I'm saying is, if somebody out there fights this and wins, it won't be good.
Right.
But I'll support it, just so I'm on the record, I don't like it.
Right. I think when it's recommended by the state health department, it becomes a standard of care, standard practice. And, it also, tells me that this is something that's has legal muster.
I just want to clarify something too. We keep talking about HIPAA. HIPAA only covers covered entities. Schools are not covered entities under HIPAA. There may be other health privacy rules, but they're not actually covered under HIPAA.
That's correct. It's a different law, but it's a similar student privacy law.
I believe it is FERPA, but I just, we should at least know what we're addressing.
I just want to focus on discrimination, not HIPAA.
Right.
That's what I was focused
on. Right.
Can we talk about the bottom line of the red, yellow, green matrix about the quarantine protocol? I just want to, so if we have lowercase numbers, we're saying that we can quarantine regardless of where the contact was, in school or out of school. A moderate number of cases, we can handle the in-school quarantines only if we think they contracted it in school. Is that right? And then red is going to depend on what we can manage through.
Correct.
I understand the logic there, but it seems like it's adding a layer of complexity to maybe the matrix that doesn't need to be there.
Well, and I would point that it has a lot to do with the condition of masking.
Okay.
So if you look at like the elementary school, if you're into that middle section, masks are required. And that close contact, because everybody is wearing a mask, close contact is less than 3 feet. And the guidelines still allow for in-school quarantine, in the classroom quarantine.
I'll just also point out that the idea is that if we are in that grade level, that actual number of cases that we would be dealing with on that quarantine level would be low enough that it could potentially be manageable by building staff in terms of enforcing masking, doing the testing that's required for those quarantines and things like that. When we're in that moderate level, we would not have necessarily the capacity to do anything other than any classroom exposure. And then at the high level, it may get to the point where we can't handle the number of people that need to be on quarantine in the school in terms of the testing. So we may have to have a limit for, we're just beyond our ability to be able to monitor this. So just putting that caveat in there. And then all of this is really very dependent on the ability of school staff to monitor this and make sure people are are following the protocol so that we know that we're keeping other students safe. So at any point, if a student is on in-school quarantine and, is not following those protocols as listed, they would then be converted to a
The
home
matrix.
environment.
Yep.
How many cases would we have right now based on the per?
Right now it's two.
We're at 2, so we would be in the green
or
2.
round up 3?
No, it would be 2.
So we're green right now.
Well, you gotta look at last week, we would have been red this week. So if we're yellow this week and yellow again next week, we'll be in that for the start of the elementary school. You wanna look at 2 weeks data.
So
That's the recommendation.
Right, I get that.
So the case numbers they're hard numbers, they're not decimals, they're not fractions, but when you take it as a ratio per 100,000 per 7 days, then you get a decimal point.
And it's a rolling 7 days. So today's 7 days, includes that. So each day it's a different 7 days block, really.
Is that map with the different zip codes that was up earlier? That's updated every time there's a new case uploaded?
Yes, daily.
Daily.
Not every time, but.
Like 2 p.m.
That's updated.
And what I was telling Justin earlier is that from the county, we don't test 7 days a week in the county. So the reported data out of the county and out of the zip code may only be 2 or 3 days a week, where maybe we do a lot of testing on Monday, results on Tuesday, maybe we do a lot of testing on Friday, results on Saturday, but we don't do any testing Saturday, Sunday. So you're going to see, cases kind of do this up and down. That's why they do the rolling average for 7 days. As we start to spike, then the bumps won't seem as obvious. But right now we're early in the surge, so we're kind of fluctuating between that green yellow zone, red zone. It was red now,
I was an idea with the green, yellow, and red could be a subsection in there. Let's say we're getting near let's say we've been at 2. Well, I guess if we get one more case in 4,700 citizens that live in the zip code, then the elementary school will be masked. Just one case. Okay. It would be nice to have a layer in there where mask would be highly recommended. That we're sneaking up, and the school could put out an email saying that letting parents know, and maybe try to get a few more masks in the school, and then still have the yellow or the red for the high school, I guess, to activate mandatory masking.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier I had mentioned that the caseload, particularly where masks become mandatory at high school, is if the caseload is 20 times higher than it was in the initial proposal. So I guess I'd like to hear from both from Nurse Lindsay and from Dr. Fox. Are you comfortable with that, or where are you? Do you think that that's a reasonable compromise?
To be perfectly honest, I think this is an incredible concession from our perspective for allowing that level of disease in our community before we take more restrictive action. This is an extra category. So the yellow is actually includes substantial and high based on the CDC breakdown of cases. And this is just a brand new double extra bad category to trigger more restrictive masking in that 7th to 12th grade group. The one, there's a couple of things that I think of that have some logic to it would be that there's more vaccinated people in that group. So the overall risk to those students is relatively less than if it were a totally unvaccinated population. I do, having the percent of student staff as an or helps to make sure that we don't have to get to skyrocketing cases before we do something. If we start to see a big quarantine within the school building, we can take action before those county cases, or the difficult cases rise. And, I think the other piece of this is that I definitely think your point about the vaccinated students and having maybe a caveat built into it to say, until those students in the elementary school are vaccinated, this is not an acceptable risk that we want to put them at. I think that would be, something that could help to provide some additional protection and reassurance to those parents that have that concern for those elementary school and sixth grade kids. And we continue to have the opinion that the best course of action for the school is for universal masking for K through 12. And that is our official recommendation. This is a plan we can work with, but it's not a preferred plan. Thank you.
Question?
Yeah.
So in the yellow, it's 10 to 20% of the student population.
Student and staff.
Student and staff.
Combined.
So I'm using a number of 800 student and staffs divided by 2 would be 400 per building. And let's just use that.
Ballpark, yeah.
All right.
That'd be pretty close.
So why are the numbers so different? So we're looking at 40 minimum of school students and only 3 to, I'm talking about yellow, 3 to 9 throughout 4,700 people. That seems just quite a range.
Mm-hmm.
The number of quarantines is much larger than the number of cases.
It
It
includes cases and those close contacts that are in quarantine. So there could be 20 close contacts per case.
And sure,
So
that's clear, but still, the presumption of quarantining is you could be positive, I guess, until you wait 14 days.
yeah, no doubt. I think those numbers are a little relaxed, in my opinion, those school case numbers, but it's something that we took a look at, Belmont, Schuldberg, Cuba City, and tried to take some of the feedback from parents and the public and some of the board members and try to adopt some of that as the data we would track.
So in these matrices, when does the policy get repealed? Because when the green carries the 0 at the bottom end.
Do we not repeal it until 6 weeks after elementary schools have a chance to get kids vaccinated? I mean,
When's the whole protocol get repealed?
Yes. Doesn't this pretty much say like masks are always optional?
Yeah, so you're wondering when we get rid of masks being optional and discouraged or unallowed?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I don't see it happening anytime soon. Just from my medical opinion, just because, there could be another wave of cases later in the year. There's other variants circulating that could come this way. And what we're really waiting for is for a predominant COVID variant to remain among us that's not as deadly as the current variant. We're hoping that it kind of settles out as something similar to the common cold, which is like what the other coronavirus strains that we've been living with for decades do. So I can't give you a good crystal ball on that, but I hope we get to that point where we're asking that question legitimately. Like we'd say we've had 0 cases in the community for 2-3 months. I'd be open to revisiting this.
I guess I'm just, with this particular question, why would we ever make it essentially against the rules for a kid to wear a mask? There are all kinds of reasons a kid might want to wear a mask.
I don't think we ever.
You're not implying that, are you? Or you're just, or are you?
No, I'm not saying like masks are banned,
But
For example, you know, if my kid had a runny nose, you know, I might send her to school in a mask, or if I have a runny nose, I might go to work in a mask, even after COVID, just because, you know, I don't want to get anyone sick, you know, if I've got a little cough, you know, but I don't have a fever, you know. So you might have sick kids that are mildly ill that aren't getting sent home, but
I guess
might wear a mask just
part of my concern with,
or maybe you've got a kid on chemotherapy that wants to wear a mask to protect themselves, you know. I don't know.
I guess I see it as a slippery slope kind of, because if it's optional, then it can be mandated. I don't know.
Well, it can always be mandated, right?
That's my concern.
Well, I mean, even without this matrix, you know, the board can vote to mandate masks, just like several schools have done already, you know, without any goalposts. So I think it's, I don't know, I don't see where you're getting at as far as it's relevant to this matrix, but you want like a sundowning date on this, is what you're
More out
saying,
of
or-
curiosity, I guess. I mean, I'm trying to understand. I know what I'm voting for.
So this is
Well,
specifically to the 21-22 school year, so do we think about it in that regard, that we are talking very specifically for this school year, and we will reevaluate what things look like? Hopefully we spend the entire spring in green and don't have to think about it again after that.
I know it would be impossible to say with certainty, but, you know, we hear September, maybe October, or November at the latest out here. Is there an idea when 12 and under or 11 and under may have a vaccine available to them? And then you look at, okay, you know, to come back to what Gary had talked about 6 weeks later, you know, is that when you want
That's
to
what
look
I would
at?
focus. Give
Look
them
at-
6 weeks, then maybe we
Look
can
at this
revisit it.
plan again after
Not
6
until
weeks is up. You know, then it addresses it a little bit sooner. But
And I think at that point, we would want to revisit this anyway, because then they should fall under the same.
we should treat everyone the same.
7 through 12.
can you make both of them the same?
But I think that as long as COVID remains active, even if people have access to vaccines, we need to have the top level, if there are, you know, if we have 20% of our student population out, we need to have that fail safe.
And I think you could address that at that time, you know, when you reevaluate any of these things, you could certainly look at that point in time.
So
Does this change the plan for, because let's be clear, I'm, and I can't say for certain, but it sounds like the kids in the elementary school are going to have masks on at quite a bit of the time throughout the school year. Are we going to give them ample opportunities to take their mask off, get fresh air? I know there's a debate back and forth from parents and health experts. You can find any kind of data you want to on the internet to support what you want to believe, but we need to get these kids some fresh air if this school and this board is going to require masks on them kids.
That happened last year. There were high school, middle school classes going outside for mask breaks. I know at the elementary, they were doing the same thing. So that would be part of the recommendation, would be to allow for those opportunities to take place, to get kids outside, get them fresh air, let them take their masks off and provide those opportunities.
And if they're disposable masks, I really think we need to, if they wear them in the AM, throw them away, new one in the PM.
Okay. Go ahead, make your comment first.
Do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I would.
I would make the motion to approve the matrix presented in the quarantine protocols as presented by the medical staff and the administration.
May I request a modification that we have masks required until 6 weeks after the vaccine is available to the elementary age group.
So you want to last full-time until the vaccine.
And if not, that's fine. If you don't want to add that in, that's fine.
That's a hard sell.
So are you asking that the elementary kids are 100% masked starting September 7th until 6 weeks after a vaccine is available? Is that what you're
I'll
asking?
stick with my original motion, and I want that motion to state that the chance to revisit it 6 weeks after whenever that time is. If it ain't January, I can't help. Until then, I can't help.
6 weeks after the vaccine's
Yes,
released.
I certainly can't pull the vaccine out and speed it over.
I'll second.
Okay. So
What's
Angie,
the motion again?
we've got a motion to approve the protocol, the COVID protocol for this school year and the matrix as presented. Period. By Sullivan, second by Bush. Any further discussion? Sorry, and to be revisited 6 weeks after a vaccine becomes available for elementary school age kids.
We had a board member request maybe changing
Under 12.
or to and. There's no support for that on the board. On that, I'm just asking.
I don't support it, but
I'm with what's in front of us right now.
I have a hard time voting for this simply because it doesn't follow CDC guidelines. It's even too relaxed in my book, but it is, like Dr. Fox said, it's something I can live with. And I would be comfortable sending my elementary school child unvaccinated if this protocol is passed.
I'm not gonna vote for it either because I think it's too restrictive. So we got something in common, Dr. Dunn. Opposite opinion.
We have a lot more in common than you might think. Okay, anyone else want to have a discussion or a question?
I think it might be good just to clarify, because the document, I believe, says Friday's number at 2:00. But then I heard, unless I was wrong, then I just heard Wednesday, we could start on Wednesday. And we're using 2 weeks for the initial. It's 2 weeks if it goes down, it has to go 2 weeks. But we're also using 2 weeks to determine the initial status and not the week before.
I would look at, if school starts Wednesday. Last week we were in the red, so if tomorrow we're in the yellow, we would be looking at that number, and at the 712 building, masks would be recommended for 7 through 12, but required for 6th graders.
So
there is one more week before the elementary starts. So you would have 2 Fridays. You'd have this Friday and next Friday, September 3rd.
So we remain in the red zone until we're yellow 2 weeks in a row. That's what you're saying?
I just want to clarify if that's, because we have not started anywhere.
Right.
So are we enacting a 2 week period because we aren't starting anywhere?
Yes, correct. Asking the 2 week period. It reads on Friday to be enforced on Monday.
And we're talking about school required activities as well. So
enforced on Saturday?
if you were, because we're not talking about our athletics here, we're talking about during the school day. So volleyball practice, football practice, those aren't necessarily required activities. I know it doesn't make sense, but a lot of districts are following that same protocol. We're talking about what we're doing in the school building during the school day.
Dr. Dunn, I have one more question on this. Long-term care facilities would be included in these numbers if they're in the zip code. I mean, do you think that's fair? Because that is a very controlled environment.
Well, it is, but it gets into the facility from the community. You know, it's usually from a nurse or an aide that brings it from the community, or a family member visitor. You know, so you know, it's almost more concerning if the first cases are in a nursing home, because there's really no more protected place in a zip code than a nursing home in terms of protocols, masking, screening, you know, using protective equipment, et cetera. So if it's getting through those protections to infect a resident, then we might have a bigger problem on our hands in terms of staff bringing it in. But I get what you're saying. I mean, yes, a nursing home resident case would count towards the community data. But to me, that's relevant. To me,
You know, I kicked around thinking of using county average and say a huge wave goes to Highland schools and it knocks us out there. You know? There's nothing fair about this, no matter however you want to slice it.
no doubt about it. This is unfair that we are having a spike of cases starting right at the beginning of the school year. It is not fair. But here we are. Okay.
People want to hear it. Let's get out of here.
Angie, let's call the question, please.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Janetka,
Bob?
Sorry, no.
Gelding,
No.
Stefan,
No.
Dunn,
Yes. I think it just passed. 4-3. Okay. So,
Dr. Dunn, will you entertain another motion?
sure.
I make a motion that at the elementary school, we have universal masking until 6 weeks after a vaccine is available for ages 12 and under, or 12 to 5.
We have a second.
Anybody will?
I'll second that.
No, it's not.
It's
Somebody
under.
pass the motion back and agree to the motion.
It's a great question.
What's that?
It seems like we're passing a motion contradictory to the motion.
I know. I don't
know that would be allowable under Robert's rule, and, you know, be like.
So do I need to say, in addition to protocols just passed, an additional protocol requiring elementary masking until the time 6 weeks after a vaccine is available for the younger
To
population?
me, it makes no sense because we just passed this matrix. Now we're basically already changing. We
I would say that the matrix could continue going forward no matter what. This is for a special limited time. Just my way of looking at it. I'm no expert.
But in essence, you're taking the matrix away from the elementary school.
Right. We could have language that we highly recommend masks in the elementary school until such a time.
And that wouldn't require a motion. You could just say, as a board, we would highly recommend wearing masks until 6 weeks after, but you would still follow the matrix. I don't know that that would require a motion and formal
I
action.
will point out that the bottom quarantine protocol would still apply even if the masking is required until vaccine required. So that we could allow in-school quarantine for classroom and non-classroom exposures if testing capacity allows, if we're in that low range, and, you know, regardless of whether this masking amendment passes. So I think we would have a lot of people being able to stay in person if we're in that situation.
Well, I apologize. I don't know what the right thing to do here is.
I don't know if we want to do it.
I know. What if, is it possible to do this? What if we voted on it and then if it turned out the motion was invalid, then it would be disregarded? Or if you want to make a comment that you don't feel comfortable that this violates a prior motion in your opinion, then we'll disallow it.
I go back to, you know, okay, let's say let's say you made a motion that we're gonna have 200 days of school. And then after that motion passed, the next person comes in and says, well, I'm gonna make a motion that we have 180 days of school, and that then passes. Which one are you? You have two passed motions that in essence contradict each other. I don't know that you have, I don't know that that's something that you're allowed to do.
So you think we should disallow the motion?
I believe so.
So I would
Okay.
argue though that this is a supplemental motion as opposed to an argumentative motion. That
Yeah,
if we were going to say, we were going to have 200 days of school, and the next motion is we're going to have 200 days of school, and there's going to be 3 teacher and service days at the end of the year. Is that not enhancing the previous motion as opposed to arguing against it? Is my motion not enhancing what we previously had passed?
Yeah, my personal opinion is that Joni's motion would like layer on top of it. The matrix would still be there. This would just be a limited time, a supplement, you would call it almost, until certain circumstances change.
Isn't the motion
Gary
saying?
included that same time period in his motion.
I guess if you wanted that, you should have voted no on the original matrix.
I believe that you're changing what that matrix protocol is with your
So,
follow-up motion.
Can I also point out that you're not just supposed to vote on the matrix protocol tonight? This matrix is one very small piece of this entire layered approach, and a separate layered approach. We have many different layered approaches in here, and proposing an additional layered approach of until something happens. You know, this is massive requirement of the children. And then I would also point out that if there's any change for elementary school math, that 6th grade should be considered a part of that, as it's considered separate on this matrix for that very reason.
Okay.
All right.
Call on that?
You have, the motion was the matrix and the protocols that were presented. And the particular protocol, in my opinion, the protocol that you're asking to layer on changes that matrix. And therefore I don't believe that that's something that you could do.
Okay.
I will accept that. I took my shot, and I accept that our decision is to follow the matrix as it is presented. So thank you for the discussion.
But you don't need board approval to put out an email to the elementary parents, highly recommending them to wear masks.
No. Here's the matrix. We'll send all of this out, put the link on, give them an opportunity where to go to find the same data that we're going to look at. But yes, certainly say, you know what, masks are optional, but we strongly recommend at this point in time that, masks are worn, and that's a family choice at that point in time. Yeah, there's nothing that would prevent us from doing that.
Before we move on, I just want to say thank you to the administration, specifically to Nurse Lindsay and Dr. Fox for helping us develop these protocols. I know there's some debate about the status of the contract, but Dr. Fox has been our medical advisor, and whether she's doing this as an employee or as a volunteer, I still appreciate the work she's done. I also want to point out that this has not been Dr. Fox's opinion. This has been Dr. Fox applying the recommendations from CDC, DHS, and the health department and putting it into a protocol that works for this school. And she also does not stand alone. She stands with 11 other doctors from our community that most of you go to for your health of your families and your children. And 500 doctors from the UW just released a paper just today that agrees with what Dr. Fox is asking us to do. So just keep in mind that she is standing on very big shoulders, and this is not one person's opinion that we're following. So next is potential outsourced virtual learning option. This was asked to be put on the board agenda because a lot of parents were requesting a virtual option, especially if masks were optional at the school. So I asked the administration to explore that as an option. So Mr. Wainwright, what do you have to share with us tonight?
We had reached out to several area schools who are basically doing the same thing. They're using a third-party vendor. One of the vendors is called Rural Virtual Academy. And unfortunately, reaching out to them, they no longer have seats available. There was another one in Kiel, Wisconsin, and I might say it wrong. I don't know if it's Kiel Schools or Kiel East Schools, but they have an online virtual academy. Reached out, and about mid-morning, I received an email back saying we no longer have seats available. We are exploring another one called Edmentum, EDMENTUM, and they have at least shared a potential cost to us to provide that opportunity for parents. If parents truly want to stay here in the district but want a virtual option, this would be a route for us to go. I have a contact information, I have some pricing that I will try to reach out to them tomorrow. But we began this conversation on Tuesday, so I think everybody is in the same boat. They're looking for options, and seats are filling up. A lot of times you might be limited in what you're able to offer, or how many students at one particular school could get. So I will try to get more information on this Edmentum, and I'll share that out as soon as I can.
Yeah, I'm just curious how the board feels about pursuing this going forward. Go ahead.
Some of the emails and even some of the discussion tonight, if the proposal passed that the medical experts and the administration worked on, is that going to alleviate some of the parents pulling their kids out of school?
That's a great question. I certainly hope so, but I don't think.
As I do too, and
I think it's going to be a mixed response.
Okay.
That's my sense, and apparently a lot of families have already enrolled out, regardless. But they do have an option to re-enroll later in the year. So I think what we decide still matters, but we'll just have to track how it goes over the next few weeks. And
I want to say, I don't want to lose another kid out of our district. We've lost enough last year. I don't got to go through the numbers again. We've gone through them enough. And I hope this is a compromise for our district.
How does everyone feel about continuing to offering a virtual learning experience to families that are not comfortable with the protocols we just proposed? Is that something that we want to have the administration continue to pursue, to offer families?
Well, am I wrong for thinking this? We have 20 kids that want to take it. I don't know how much it's going to cost, right?
Right.
And this is wrong. That's 20 students we don't have in our district. That's one teacher. So I'm not saying we cut a teacher, but if we're losing 20 students, that's basically one teacher. Okay?
Right.
However much, whatever pay scale you want to look at.
Right.
So now we're paying for the virtual learning, plus we're basically paying for the teacher. I don't want to say we don't need, but we don't have the numbers to support, is what I'm getting at.
Right.
It's a double-edged sword.
I think
This is Bob. I just want to say, I think with what we passed tonight, I don't know that it would provide all that much comfort to bring kids back, because there's no guarantee that they'll be masking in the elementary school. So I do, I don't think they'll be coming back. I think the point of having to get rid of a teacher, yes, maybe we'll lose that much income. Unfortunately, all 20 of these kids are not going to be in the same class. So I really don't know what we could do, staffing wise, that would make any kind of sense.
Go ahead.
the three programs that I mentioned, all of them, in essence, the students are our students. And we have a 66, it's called a 6630 agreement. It's like 66.0301. So that's our sweep agreement. So we send some money to the Iowa Grant School District because they're housing that equipment that we use and part of that purchasing. Or some of those agreements are for our options in education school. A school district is paying us to send their student. That's that 6630 agreement. All three of these virtual opportunities are basically in the same boat. So the students are ours. They're still in our student enrollment count. And we are agreeing to pay a fee to this particular location. All three are less than the cost what we would lose if a student open enrolled out of our district. So there is some cost savings if they stay our student and select this virtual opportunity.
So for example, the way I'm looking at it is, let's say there's 20 students who, just despite what happened tonight, are going to open enroll out of our district. So we lose, say, approximately $7,000 per pupil on our budget. So if we were to spend anything less than that per pupil to keep them on our rolls but allow them to participate virtually, then in my mind, we keep them in the district and we don't lose as much money. Yes.
I know what you're saying.
Right,
Yeah,
so-
you're not wrong.
Okay, so,
Here's my thing.
yeah,
No, I'm not gonna say. I'm not going.
well,
Why didn't we do that? Why didn't we do that last year, trying to keep kids?
well, I mean,
We didn't care when kids left last year.
do what to keep kids in?
Keep kids, why didn't we?
Well, we did offer a virtual option, right? And we just put it on our own teachers, which turned out to be extremely taxing and,
It was taxing on that, that is for sure.
right, so that's why the administration is not recommending we do that again. But it's,
Only because we're 5 days in person.
that's right, 5 days,
Figure.
correct, right.
State.
Right, so we're looking for maybe some partnership with, a virtual learning company where we would pay a fee per student. That way our teachers can focus on the in-classroom. And we can contract with a company to help provide a learning experience that's still associated with Mineral Point, but may be something that the families are more comfortable doing. So I know that Mr. Wainwright doesn't have an actual option to propose. I just want to anticipate, maybe if he comes up with something a week from now, would it be possible to give him some guidance now to say, if you can find a partner that you find to be of reliable quality for Mineral Point standards, that say it doesn't exceed this amount per pupil, could we authorize that now? You know what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying completely.
And that way we don't have to have another meeting in 1 week to vote on the same thing. But I think in order for us to do that, we would have to agree that it's a good idea to do it. And two, we would need to set some kind of financial parameters. And we would need to just trust that the administration would pick a company that would do an acceptable job.
Did the board vote last year? You have to help me out with my memory here. The end of last year that we were going to do only 5 days in person. Was there an official vote? Or was
That was the recommendation of the board, and the board accepted that recommendation. I don't know if that was actually a motion, a second, and a vote, but that was in the spring of the year. It was like the all intents purposes was to be here 5 days a week.
We should look into that and see if, and that would determine possibly what we could do.
Well, that wouldn't violate the motion, would it, if we added something to the 5 days a week?
If there was a motion saying we're going only 5 days and no virtual offering.
Okay, right. If we pass the
We would
motion.
have to notify that motion.
Okay.
What happened?
We can look back at the minutes back, and I'm sure it was the spring of the year. I don't know if it was.
I'm fairly certain it was a statement of intent, but I don't know.
I know it was with the other board, it wasn't with this board. So it had to be in April.
Yeah, it was towards the end of last school year. I know that. Well, I mean, is it possible to make a motion contingent that it doesn't contradict the prior motion?
This motion's getting very
Or should we just forget it and we'll just call a special meeting?
I'd say it's good.
I think it was a motion. That passed 7-0.
We passed 7-0 with no virtual option. I know that for a fact.
And I think it was a motion.
Right,
So,
so,
I mean, if you want to call a special meeting, I don't care.
well,
I know nobody wants to.
No, I mean, would it make a difference? I mean, if.
Well, Mitch would get some information, what is available and.
And then see if we need to
The cost of it.
reconsider the
Yeah.
previous motion.
Right.
Okay,
I was just trying to pull up the April meeting.
And I'm open to offering it. I just want to understand the financials a little bit more.
If
I
we,
think since we're going to have to make eventually, if we want to offer any virtual schooling, have a motion that we have it or authorize Mitch do it. I think because, Mitch is the district administrator and we trust him. I think if we did pass some financial parameters tonight, maybe get some other questions answered, we could give him the authority to go ahead and pull the trigger if he needed to. Because we're running out of time. I mean, the one thing I've heard consistently from both from people who are pleasant and people who are less pleasant with dealing with us is school starts very soon. And they kind of need to know what to do. So.
well, I don't know. It sounds like we've got too many questions unanswered and.
Matt has some stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I had the same question Barry did. Can we even offer virtual? And I remember that discussion in the spring. My understanding of it was, our district would not offer virtual, right? But I think with what we're proposing here, we're looking for partners, third parties to provide for this situation. So that was my understanding.
I think the part of no virtual was that teachers knew when they go to school this year, like, we are not going to push virtual learning on.
Right.
And it was a definite no.
Right.
So there was never any talk about doing it outside. It was no.
No, totally. I know. So we would need to split hairs a little bit to see if,
Austin has
third party.
Yes, sir.
I guess for my statement, I'm gonna agree. It's not that we're teaching that. That's where Gary's at, right? We're not teaching virtual. I'm not gonna ask my.
Oh, no, we know that.
My teachers to teach virtual. To me, when I look at that from the high school level and I can apply additional, we have classes that are sourced out. They are technically a virtual class, right? They're through Grand Canyon, they're through Southwest Tech, they're through UW Platte. Those are classes that our students take virtually. And have been. So this would just be another thing that would be more of a full-time version program. It wouldn't be necessary. When we voted that last year was, I'm not gonna go down and ask Tom Stager to teach virtually. But if a kid if we look at this and we want to do this, then if a kid wants to choose to go virtual full-time, well, they're not gonna have Tom Stager as a science teacher. But they may have Mrs. Sue as a science teacher from Edmonton or wherever. For me, it's not really any different than what we're offering for college credits. It's just a little bit different program.
So at the April 12th meeting in the minutes, it says that motion made by member Heisner to provide 5 days per week of in-person instruction for the 21-22 school year with no virtual option except under rare circumstances, seconded by Lindsay, and it carried 7-0. So the question is, are we under rare circumstances? I think the implication was, say we've got someone homesick or people on quarantine, those kind of things. So, I mean, would families threatening to leave the district without a virtual option be a rare circumstance? We could probably justify that, but I guess what we could also do is we could have member Heisner reconsider the motion. And we could vote to reconsider the motion, and then we could pass a motion to authorize the administration to look into virtual options not to exceed this amount per pupil.
So at this point, I'm asking that we reconsider the motion.
Okay. So can anybody second that, Mitch? Or
I would say yes.
Especially since member Lindsay is
No longer on the board.
here.
I will second it.
Jeanette.
If that motion was passed, as Gary stated, to give teachers confidence that they weren't going to come into this school year and be asked to do double duty again, teaching both in the classroom and virtual. So as we reconsider this motion and the direction we're going makes a lot of sense to me, but I want to make sure that no teacher out there listening is thinking, oh my goodness, here we go again. This is happening all over. I want to make sure that we set this up appropriately.
So Mitch and Doc, do you think we set this up where it would be budget neutral then for the district?
Just as an answer. I think that's a reasonable motion to make, because then it could not exceed the amount we would lose in open enrollment per pupil, whichever amount that is. I think it's seven
And so
something.
if a family wanted to take their children to a different virtual offering, that's their business and they have a right to do that.
Correct.
Right, but then we would lose the funding.
We would lose the total amount of the open enrollment would be lost.
I see.
If we do it this way, then the only dollar amount would be the dollar cost for that student to take the class through this program. The other thing you have to look at, and I know this doesn't pertain to the motion to reconsider, but state funding, your student enrollment, it's a 3-year rolling average. So whatever we lose, it will take us, if all of them came back, it would take us 2 more years to get that funding back, because it's a 3-year rolling average. With a program like this, they're still our students, so that we don't have that 3-year loss. If next year, and we keep saying this, if next year can be 100% normal, and those students all want to be here, they counted for us as 100% this year, they'll count for us as 100% next year.
And to be clear, a parent wouldn't be able to roll their child into a private school and then hand us a $15,000 bill.
Correct. Right. This is our student, and this is a program we're offering our student through our school. Like you said, if somebody wanted to open enroll somewhere else, that's taken through the state.
Okay.
That they take that payment from us at the end of the year on our last quarterly payment. But yes, we wouldn't pay for somebody to go to Edgewood High School or Edgewood Elementary School. That's not part of this.
It would not be Mineral Point curriculum.
It would not. This would be a third party curriculum.
That needs to be specified.
Yep. This is a third party, so it's not somebody zooming in with Mr. Austin and seeing all the kids in Mr. Austin's classroom. This is a third party.
So once a student commits to this, it's going to be a year-long commitment, right?
I would need to get the particulars of this Edmentum program.
My question would be if a student does this first semester and then comes back second semester, I would only assume that stuff is going to be taught completely different. Are they going to be able to just jump in with this class over here and just be able to get right on board?
Great question.
It's a great question.
I think it's got to be a year-long commitment.
It would be like changing schools if your parents moved you from Dodgeville to Mineral
Right. I mean,
Point.
if
Yes.
they're using Common Core, you would think they would have this. similar
That
content.
was the answer I was going to have to. We'll have students that move here even, after, halfway through the second 9 weeks, and it's like, well, what did you have what was the math curriculum you used? We use this, and you meet them where they are and you get them caught up and they're part of our programming again. The RVA program, that Rural Virtual Academy that I talked about, that one to me is it was the most expensive that I saw of the 3, and it was also the student enrolls, you pay. If the student comes back, that money's gone. The Kiel School District would prorate. So if a student went, here's what you paid for the year, but if they came back to you at semester time, they prorate it and reimburse you some. I need to find out what Edmentum does. And Edmentum is, from what I've can gather is the least expensive to the district that would allow a virtual option.
And it's what Dodgeville uses for at least some of their grades, if not all of them. Okay, so. if
You have a
we-
motion and a second.
So, all right, so if we pass this to reconsider the motion, then we should, just to remove any ambiguity about the virtual option, we should probably consider a motion to allow the administration to partner with a virtual program to offer to these students. Does that seem reasonable?
Yes, yeah.
As long as it's budget neutral.
Yeah, if we passed it, we have to.
Just because if we pass the reconsideration motion, that means we reverse the vote to do no virtual option. And so that leaves lots of options open, including making our teachers teach virtual again, right? So if we make a second motion to specify what we need by a virtual option to the administration, then we eliminate some ambiguity about what we mean by virtual. Does that all make sense?
So the motion, we have the motion and the second.
Yeah.
Repeal, that's the first thing we vote on, right?
Yes.
That's the whole question on that.
Okay, Angie, call the question on reconsidering the motion from April 12th about 5 days a week and no virtual option.
Eisner,
Yes.
Janetka,
Yes.
Gelding,
Yes.
Stefas,
No.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to direct the administration to select a provider for a virtual option for this year with some kind of budgetary parameters.
I'm just gonna ask the question.
Yeah.
Let's say our cases keep increasing and our school has to shut down. So our kids will be offered a virtual option with your employees, correct?
Correct.
Mitch?
Yes.
Okay, and that won't affect this other program with the families that choose to.
Correct. So I would say, you want one vendor that is a third-party provider for virtual school that allows us to maintain our student enrollment.
All right. And their test scores will be transferable if they choose to come back after the year. You'll make sure that's available to these families.
Yeah, that would be a records request to get whatever grades they've earned through this virtual academy sent to us, just like if somebody moved from Dodgeville, there'd be a records request for their grades and test scores and things from the Dodgeville School District.
And will you take input from the parents or will this be your decision?
On the program?
On what program you're going to choose?
I don't know that I have time to do a survey of parents trying to provide a virtual option in a week that has space available to us, because I'm starting with who has space available. Now, what are your program offerings? And then we investigate that, and then I would offer it out to families to say, if you're considering virtual options.
I don't want you to have to pick because parent A, parent B, and parent C all want a different virtual option. And now you got to be the bad guy to pick.
And that's why I said you would, in my mind, you would say you're going to have one virtual option. So if it's determined that Edmentum has the space, has a valid curriculum, and is cost effective, that's the program I would recommend. So then if somebody were to come in and say, yeah, but I found this one, it's like, no, this is the one, we only have one option. This is our one option. So that, yeah, I would still be the bad guy, but it would be the fact that we're only offering one option.
What do you want to set for a parameter for financial not to exceed? Is saying budget neutral a helpful enough guide?
Well,
To be honest.
you need to realize that we already have everything in place. The building's getting heated, the teachers are getting paid, the buses are getting paid, everything's getting paid. So because we have 3 parents that want to leave, that's not going to cut our expenses down.
Right, so maybe budget neutral isn't the right word
Maybe
to
it's
use.
not, yeah.
I
Well,
would say
so,
dollar amount, not to exceed the open enrollment dollar amount.
that seems reasonable to me.
I wouldn't have the slightest idea how much it costs per student.
I honestly think that a quick little special
I'm getting like 4
meeting,
to 6 grand per
when
student.
you get the numbers, Mitch, I mean, it could even be a Zoom call meeting.
Could be $100,000.
Then people would know, because we might say $5,000 and that it may be 3 times that much.
The dollar amount I would ask you to set is per pupil,
Right.
because I would need to know that. Then I would need to go to the families and say, okay, those of you that are looking to open enroll, is this an option you would consider? How many would say yes? Then I would have to get that number to come back to the school board and say, okay, it's based on the numbers of positive responses, it's going to be, if it was $5,000 per pupil, it's going to be 50,000 or 75,000, or, based on what information I have right now. And I guess the flip side is if we lose them completely to open enrollment, that dollar amount is higher. Well, I can do it that way, but I just don't have very much time to do it.
The motion would develop a proposal and come back to the board,
Yeah,
instead of just saying it's gotta be X dollar amount.
I'm just trying to, preempt the need for another meeting to sit and chew on the proposal again.
Is this something we could just do on Zoom? Everybody would be on their phones and just have a quick vote?
I'm okay with that if that's
Yeah,
what the board would rather do.
I think that we would know the number of parents that are thinking about it. We would know the cost of the program.
I didn't take a deep breath.
It's hard to vote for something when there's so many unknowns. And this is new territory. We've never done this before.
Yeah, but I mean, in my mind, I say, pick a good company, don't spend more than this money, and I trust you to pick the best one available and let him do his job. That's where I'm at.
In my mind, what Aaron just suggested is exactly right. We have Mitch as our administrator. We provide general oversight, and he makes these types of decisions. Mitch is more the expert on who provides such services than we are.
You want to make a motion, Bob?
I make a motion to authorize the superintendent to research and contract with a third-party virtual school vendor. And I'm just struggling with the dollar amount, where we come from.
Well, would you want to say not to exceed the open enrollment dollar amount lost per pupil?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me, not to exceed the open enrollment dollar amount per pupil.
I can't think of a better parameter, but we could reduce it. Okay. All right, so we have a second for that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Justin?
Skelding, yeah?
Approximately what is that dollar amount again, Mitch?
It's like 7,800. Somewhere 7,800 to 80, I think maybe it moved up to 8,300 per pupil for open enrollment. So if every one of these families chooses to open enroll, we lose $8,300 per family. If the dollar amount is $5,000, in essence, we're keeping an additional $3,000 in the district. We would have lost the 8. We're keeping 3 of that in district and keeping that 100% enrollment number for the following year.
And hopefully then they'll just come back to regular in-person school.
Right. You know, you could say this is for 1 year. That this is an option available only for 1 year.
Is the board in agreement? It has to be for 1 year.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't, my point is, you wouldn't say, oh, in the 22-23 school year and the 23-24 school, year, we're gonna still do this. I'll have this option. I would say that you're looking at this third-party vendor for this current school year.
I agree.
And then if somebody wants to come back, I'm not telling the student they have to stay there, you know, but that this program won't extend past this current school year, is the point I was trying to make.
Bob, can you amend your motion to specify for this school year only?
I would like to amend my motion to specify, to give superintendent that authority just for this school year, 21-22 school.
Skelding, you second the amended motion. Okay. Any other discussion before we call it?
I do want to point out, just as a matter of concern for how many students may take this option. I mean, I know Bob disagrees that there has not been comfort provided tonight, but a lot of the concern that I read in the emails was that we are at a high transmission level as a state. And I think if you look at the state as a whole, there's a lot of red on there. When you look at our map, when it's orange or red, our kids are masked in the elementary school. And there's been a lot of concern about listening to our doctors. Well, I sat here with a doctor at the table when we passed the motion, who stated he was comfortable sending his kids to school with what we passed as a compromise. So I'm hopeful that those same people will listen to the doctor who is sending his kids to school and will keep them in our district. And appreciate what we've done to try and keep it safe when transmission is what is considered substantial or high.
I'll add to that no matter what side of the fence you're on, when you leave the district and the money leaves the district, it's gonna come back and bite us. We snuck away this year. We're not gonna next year. And if it gets ugly, I'm probably not the school board member you're gonna wanna see on this table when we're gonna start making cuts. I will promise you. I've been there. I know how to run a business when money is short, and it's not fun. So just when you're taking your kid out of the school, for whatever reason, there will be a cost.
Too true. Okay. Are we ready to call a question, I think? Okay. Angie?
Jeanette Cup,
Yes.
Skelding,
Yes.
Stefan,
No.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Okay, that ends the agenda. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, anyone opposed? Okay. Next meeting's regular meeting in September.
Thank you, everyone online.
Thank you.